Doesn't. I want to talk to a senator that you've all heard of, a senator who's made a lot of noise since he's been in Washington. His name, Ted Cruz, from the great state of Texas. Ted, how are you, my friend?
Joe, it's always great to be with you. Thank you for having me.
We appreciate you taking the time. I want to get to defund Obamacare in a moment because that's been your big push, and it's a push that should be out there and should be in the consciousness of America. It's not, Ted, because the diversion of Syria is taking the headlines right now. First and foremost, do you think the president is making what he's making out of Syria because he wants to derail people like you and people like me who want to see Obamacare, the abomination that it is, go away?
Well, I'm not going to speculate about his intentions on that. I will say that I do think the issue with Syria is serious, and I am glad that the president listened to bipartisan calls to take this issue to Congress. He had initially sent John Kerry out to say they were going to bomb, and they weren't going to listen to the views of Congress and the American people, and I and a number of other senators very loudly called on him and said that under the Constitution, it is Congress that has the authority to declare war, and that he needed to come to Congress and make his case to the American people. And so I will give him credit. He listened to the calls, and he's now taking this to Congress, and that's the way it's supposed to work under a Constitution. It's
the junior senator from the great state of Texas, Ted Cruz. Ted, yeah, he's going to go to Congress. He's going to go to you guys, and you're going to probably say no, and he's going to do it anyway. In Syria or in Libya, he didn't even go to you guys. Now, the thing is, he really, really wants to go and take part in something in Syria. But the problem that these military members that I mentioned off the top, and the problem that I have and many people listening have, we don't know who the bad guys are, Ted. We have no idea who the good guys are and who the bad guys are. And it turns out in Libya, we actually were launching strikes, and we knocked Gaddafi out by taking the side of, like it or not, CBS News reported this, of the rebel forces that included members of Al-Qaeda. Are we supporting Al-Qaeda in Syria too? What's going on? Who's the good guy? Who's the bad guy?
Well, the unfortunate reality is there are a whole lot of bad guys there. And, the president has been advocating arming the rebels in Syria. I think that's a strategy that makes no sense whatsoever.
Right.
Of the 9 major rebel groups that are fighting right now, at least 7 of them appear to have some significant ties to Al-Qaeda. And I'll give you one of the simplest principles of foreign policy that we ought to be following, which is don't give weapons to people who hate you. Don't give weapons to people who want to kill you.
Well, that's silly, Ted. Come on. What you're saying is don't give them weapons so they can turn around and use them on you? Really? It's crazy. It's Senator Ted Cruz, and you're right, because what happened in Libya, we don't want to repeat that. We backed up a rebel force that had no chance of winning. Gaddafi was going to snuff that uprising out in 2 seconds. We, or the president, decided, let's lob some missiles in there and basically pave the way for the rebels to take over. Not that many months later, they attacked our consulate. They killed 4 Americans, including the ambassador, and we still don't really know what happened in Benghazi. Nobody wants to see another Benghazi in Syria, and that's really the fear, isn't it?
Look, I think that's exactly right, but there's a broader problem. This administration, when it conducts foreign policy, it doesn't do so focused on U.S. national security interests. If you listen to the discussions of Syria, what Secretary Kerry and the White House keep talking about are what they describe as international norms have been violated, and we've got to go defend international law. Well, you know what? We're not the security force for the United Nations, and even the UN doesn't think that anything should happen here.
Right.
But more broadly, look, our military exists for one purpose, and that is to protect the vital national security interests of the United States of America.
Right.
And, the point you made about not arming Al-Qaeda, if you're focused on U.S. national security, that point is obvious.
Right.
Likewise, it appears what the president is pressing for is essentially protecting his public relations because he drew a red line and essentially the bluff was called.
Right.
Now there are arguable U.S. national security interests in Syria, the most notably the presence of substantial chemical weapons, and it is not in our interest to have those weapons fall into the hands of terrorists or Al-Qaeda who could use them against us or our allies. But at least to date, the president hadn't focused on that at all. Instead, It's been on making a public statement to defend international norms, and I think that is missing the point entirely.
It's Senator Ted Cruz, great state of Texas. Ted, I posted this on my Facebook the other day, and it got incredible traction. What I posted was a picture of the Middle East, and I asked a simple question. During the American Civil War, do you think it would have been appropriate for one of these countries to load up a ship, pull up to our shores, either in the Gulf of Mexico or the Atlantic coast or the Pacific coast even, and choose a side in the American Civil War? Would it have made sense for Syria or Egypt or Libya or Iran or Iraq to pull up, or Saudi Arabia, to pull up on our shores and say, I think we're going to fight on the side of the South in this one? I think the Americans on both sides, the North and the South, would have turned their arms away from each other and would have turned the arms on the invader. Wouldn't we be looked at as the invader if we suddenly decide we're going to help you out with your civil war?
Look, we certainly don't have a dog in the fight.
Right.
A civil war between Sunnis and Shiites in the Middle East,
which has been going on for centuries. It's nothing new.
Right. Well, we're not going to resolve the tensions over there, and the last thing we ought to be doing is sending our sons and daughters into harm's way to get in the middle of this sectarian civil war. We should be focused on defending the United States of America. That's why young men and women sign up to join the military, not to as you note, serve as Al-Qaeda's Air Force.
It's Senator Ted Cruz. Senator, I know that your time is limited. Let's talk about defunding Obamacare. Is it going to happen? Do you have enough backing on this? Is the continuing resolution not going to happen? Will you close down the government in Washington until you get the right answer? I mean, the colossal mistake by John Roberts can still be stopped if in fact we use our brains, and the vast majority of Americans now not only are afraid of Obamacare but don't want it to be instituted, because we're seeing how it's affecting the job pool, we're seeing how it's affecting our insurance rates. What's going to happen with that? Where are we with that?
Well, as you know, Obamacare is a train wreck. It is the single biggest job killer in this country. It is causing people to have their hours forcibly reduced. It is driving up insurance premiums. It's not working. But if typical Washington rules apply, we're not going to get the votes to defund Obamacare. So the answer, Joe, is we got to change the rules. We can't rely on typical Washington rules, and in particular, what is building, I believe, is a grassroots tsunami. Just yesterday, we crossed a very important threshold. There's a national website, don'tfundit.com, don'tfundit.com. Just yesterday, we crossed over 1 million signatures nationally of Americans all over this country signing don'tfundit.com. If your listeners want to see Republicans stand up and stand for principle, if your listeners want to see leaders in Washington say, we're going to stop this train wreck and defund it, then I would urge every one of your listeners, number one, go right now to don'tfundit.com, sign the national petition. Number two, call your senators, call your representatives. And number three, get 5, 10, 20 of your friends to do the same. This only works if millions and millions of Americans hold elected officials in Washington accountable.
Last quick question. It's Ted Cruz from the great state of Texas. They're all screaming, "Run, Ted, run!" It's awfully heady stuff, my friend. Is that something that interests you? Do you even consider it? Do you not consider it? Do you thank people, smile, and walk away? What does that do when you hear people say stuff like that?
Well, Joe, I know it seems hard to believe, but I try very hard not to focus on the politics and to focus on the substance, because I think most people are not interested in a bunch of politicians in Washington. Most people are interested in fixing the problems we've got, bringing back economic growth, bringing back jobs, shrinking this out-of-control government, getting back to the Constitution. And so I try not to pay attention to the politics at all and just stand up every day and say, we're going to fight to restore economic growth and opportunity. We're going to fight to restore the Constitution. And if you do the right thing, I think the politics usually takes care of itself. I
think you're right. Senator Ted Cruz, I know that your time is limited. Thanks a lot, my friend. We appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you, my friend. God bless.
All right, we'll talk to you soon. Senator Ted Cruz,